Ladies and gentlemen, our next session brings together voices from both the military as well as diplomacy under the panel theme Neighborhood Watch. This discussion will explore regional security, strategic partnerships, and the evolving dynamics of India's immediate neighborhood. To set the context, let us first view a short AV on the theme Neighborhood Watch.
In the neighborhood, peace is a pause, fragile, fleeting, and fiercely contested. Every border holds a story. From the Himalayas to the Indo-Pacific, the game board is redrawn every day. At the heart of preparedness lies integration, the power to fuse land, air, sea, cyber, and space into one coherent command. Theaterization, a precondition for managing future warfare. Lieutenant General Raj Shukla, PVSM, VSM, SM, retired. In the ring of neighbors, every decision carries weight, and diplomacy is the only dialogue. Managing the immediate neighborhood dynamics, Ambassador Meera Shankar. Strategic partnership in the extended region, Ambassador and Professor Veena Sikri. Together, they decode the power equations that define India's security, diplomacy, and destiny.
We are privileged to be joined by a distinguished panel. Lieutenant General Raj Shukla, PVSM, YSM, SM, retired, former commander of RTRAC, who will speak on theaterization, a precondition for managing future warfare. Also joining him is Ambassador Meera Shankar, former Ambassador of India to the United States, who will share her perspective on managing the immediate neighborhood dynamics. And Ambassador Professor Veena Sikri, former High Commissioner to Bangladesh and a leading scholar on South Asia, who will speak on strategic partnerships in the extended region. This session will be moderated by Republic Media Network's Executive Editor Niranjan Narayanaswamy, along with anchor and special correspondent Rakshita. Professor Veena Sikri will be speaking on managing the immediate neighborhood dynamics, and Ambassador Meera Shankar will be speaking on strategic partnership in the extended region.
Thank you for joining us and being with us and being so patient through what is now a little bit of a delayed session. We speak to most of you on a daily basis on television, Lieutenant General Raj Shukla and Ambassador Veena Sikri, Ambassador Meera Shankar, but it's good to have all of you on stage. And I'd like to start with talking about Neighborhood Watch. General Shukla, I'd like to start with you. And we heard from the generals this, all of this morning and this afternoon. Given the evolving threats from both western, northern, now also eastern borders, how does theaterization enhance India's ability to manage a multi-front scenario? And how does it change how we view deterrence in the subcontinent, sir?
So, let me just give a small backdrop to this theaterization. And then I'll make 2 to 3 points. This whole concept of theaterization evolved from the Kargil Review Committee report and the national security reforms that followed. And the key architect was, of course, Mr. Subramaniam. Now see, what did he say? He first spoke of a DIA, then he spoke of theatre commanders, and then a CDS. Now, what was this trio supposed to do? The first and foremost, it was meant to take the Indian military out of its defensive crouch, start looking beyond LC and LAC. So the DIA was supposed to be modeled on the American DIA, who had a global, shall we say, visage. Now, if it is not global, in our case, it should at least be regional. And the three were to be meant to be executed together. So the DIA refashions how you look at intelligence from the military lens. The theatre commanders, theaterization is not merely about air power. Air power is a speck in this whole larger debate. The theatre commander, say the Western theatre commander, would have a quasi-diplomatic visage. He would look at Pakistan, Afghanistan, possibly West Asia, and see how those realities are now coming together. Because it is just not Pakistan, it is just the Western horizons.
Yes.
Eastern theatre commander would look at the chaos in Myanmar and Bangladesh, and in concert with DIA, not wait and watch, but shape it. The maritime theatre commander would connect with the IPACOM. And the CDS, of course, was meant to operate in the strategic military domain with a far larger, shall we say, responsibility in diplomacy, not merely force. He's not merely the wielder of force, but diplomacy. Now, since, as usual, we made a hash out of it, we first get the DIA, then restrict the DIA's role to the LC. Theaterization, so it's nowhere in sight. And, of course, we created the CDS. But unless all these three things come together, a foreign policy which rests on two pillars, force and diplomacy, will continue to punch below its weight. Let me give you some examples from Sindoor. The streets of Washington and the doors of the White House were opened to Munir by Kuruvilla, the CENTCOM boss, military man. So military to military diplomacy matters. We don't even have a presence. In my last year as the army commander, when the whole argument was being made, we settled for a colonel. A colonel cannot match Munir. A country of India's size, and shall I also say now what we are getting Viksit and all that, all those ambitions we have, should have a 3-star in IPACOM and a 3-star in CENTCOM. It matters. I happened to be in Washington the same week that Asim Munir was there. The point was not that why he was lunched by Trump. He was the toast of all Washington think tanks. Our military diplomacy has regressed.
Yeah.
So the point is this, that, we ideate and then we fall back on all these issues. So theaterization has to be seen in that. Let me make just one more point.
Sure.
So this is how we have regressed. How has the world moved? Look at Ukraine. World War II, you hear of Montgomery, Patton. 71, you hear of Manekshaw. 65, Arbaksh. Who are the generals in Ukraine? Elon Musk, Alex Karp, Palmer Luckey. That is the reality. If you see what has happened, look at our whole Sindoor. BVR combat seem to have stalemated. The two air forces are not able to close in. The only way, in my view, you can break out of this stalemate is, one is, of course, through stealth and air power. The other is in things like dronery. Does it surprise you that Ukraine, a country without an air force and a navy, has held a very formidable military power at bay for 3.5 years? There is, of course, the other model, the Israeli air power model, but then they get everything from the Americans. We do not get such stuff from the Americans. So the only way to break out of this stalemate is to invest in what I call fusion, not mere integration, but fusion, and in, say, dronery. So I'll just give you an example. Since there's no time, dronery has developed as a new aerial flank. Yes. This year, the Ukrainians are buying 8 million drones, more than the artillery fired last year. So I was here in the first session and I listened very carefully. The narrative was that we've done very well in Sindoor, तो सब ठीक है, थोड़ा और करना है. I'm saying we did well in Sindoor, but we have to transform. We have to disrupt. It cannot be tinkering. Correct. It has to be, and so one last point I want to make. Please go ahead. So, in Ukraine, the reality is that artillery is challenged. The tanks don't move. I'm quoting to you Dave Patrius, who says, pehle all-arm maneuver was artillery, infantry, engineers. He says now it is 3 Russians moving in a golf cart because the tank gets hit, with 2 surveillance drones protecting him, and those 2 surveillance drones are linked to 3 strike drones. Yeah. So it is surveillance drones, strike drones. It is developed as a new aerial flank. You have to admit that. So if BVR combat has stalemated, should the army pitch for a new aerial flank? in the forms of drones. Now, I know a lot of good stuff is happening, but not in that degree. So what has really happened in Ukraine is that the warfighter, the technologist, the entrepreneur have come together. So it is not theaterization. You've got to go all the way there. Yeah. And the theater of war and the marketplace have come together. And just one last point. Of course, the Chinese lead in this. The Americans have conceded. Det 201 is what? The order which Hegseth and Trump signed a month back. Yes. When the American military said that we cannot share data with civilians, with technologists, they said, all right, get them in as lieutenant colonels and colonels. They come as lieutenant colonels, the CTO of Palantir, this, that, and the other. And now you're sharing data. They have access to your ops rooms, all this stuff. Now, this is the wrong season to, speak of excess confidentiality with Ashley Tellis and all. But Eric Skimmett has got security clearances equal to the Chairman Joint Chiefs. Now, I'm saying India has to decide. One argument is that we have regressed from the days of Kargil Review Committee in terms of integration. We have not progressed. We have regressed. And look where the world has moved, in Ukraine. Now, between these two metrics, see where you are honestly. In my view, we are not budging. And we could pay fatal consequences. The consequences could be fatal. So we have to honestly see where we are in terms of what we ourselves articulated in terms of Kargil Review Committee and where the world has gone. So I think we really need not to tinker but to transform. The point that General Bakshi was making, you have to disrupt. How do you disrupt? By creating combat overmatch with Pakistan. One part is defense budgets, inventories. All the rest is all these structural cultural corrections, which you don't do. Jointmanship, all this stuff. This is budget agnostic. It is just thinking. And with China, it has to be technological innovation, what I call asymmetric deterrence. So the sum and substance of my argument, it is just not theaterization. Is it, do we wish to transform across domains? If we are going to become this military of the kind the Prime Minister envisages, Sudarshan Chakra, then we need to transform beyond measure. What we have done is mere tinkering.
Great point. I'll take that forward, but Rakshita, to you.
Yes, I think I'll just take it to Ambassador Veena Sikri. I think General Shukla was somewhere trying to, put the context of how military diplomacy also plays an important role here. And clearly, he feels that we have regressed. We have not made any progress in your understanding and your experience in the world of diplomacy, ma'am. And what you've been observing that has been going the past decade. With the changing times, you feel that there has to be more stepping up, or you feel that there have been efforts in that area when it comes to marrying military and diplomacy?
Well, I think let us first recognize that military and diplomacy are two sides of the same coin. This is absolutely important to recognize. We must not see them as separate. If we do see them as separate, that's the start of the problem. But if we see them as two sides of the same coin, then we know that both sides have to be equally developed. There cannot be an unequal development. You cannot think you're diplomatically prepared, but then your military is weak, is a disaster. But if you're militarily over-prepared, but your diplomacy is weak, that's an equal disaster. So I think that I would like to, in this context, because of the neighborhood, draw inspiration from our neighborhood first foreign policy. And I think that the neighborhood first foreign policy put this in context. We realized that South Asia is the least integrated part of the world. We have in South Asia, our intra-South Asian trade is just about 5 to 7%. Whereas in groupings like ASEAN, it is 25%, the intra-ASEAN trade. And in groupings like the European Union, it is 45%. So you see, the question of trade and development, this builds your interdependencies. So if you have to be militarily prepared, but preparing for peace means that you have to have the interdependencies worked out. There has to be a commitment among the people of the neighboring countries, commitment to each other because of shared prosperity. And that is why I think one of the most important aspects that we took up in our neighborhood first foreign policy was connectivity, because there was very poor connectivity between the countries of South Asia. Roads, railway, sea lanes of communication, of course air travel was there, but other than that, railways, absolutely nothing. So it took, for example, for a product to reach from Delhi to Dhaka could take up to a week or 10 days. there was no containerization, there was no railway travel. So building the infrastructure of trade, the infrastructure of connectivity, which moves people also, brings you the commitment to come to each other's country instead of going far away. And also we realize that borders cannot be only militarized. Borders are vital for security, but if borders are only militarized with no people-to-people connectivity, it's a recipe for disaster. Because then the people move away and there are empty spaces where either illegal immigrants or illegal activities, drug smuggling, people smuggling, women smuggling, children smuggling, all that stepped in. So that is why the whole idea of the neighborhood first foreign policy is to blend the importance of security with the importance of living together. So we have in addition to building your connectivity, trade, and development, you also have 5 principles that we are trying to develop for our neighborhood first foreign policy. These are Shanti, you want peace; Samvad, you want conversation, you want dialogue; Samman, you want respect. You must give respect to your neighbors, no matter how small or they are compared to you. You have to have complete equality and respect. There must be mutual respect, mutual sensitivity, and mutual understanding. And then there has to be samriddhi, prosperity. Now the other person is not going to believe in you until he shares your prosperity, until he feels he has a stake in your prosperity. India cannot grow economically unless our neighboring countries believe in that prosperity, that if they share it, it's valuable to them. And the fourth is Sanskriti, our shared civilizational heritage. So these are the 5 principles on which all our programs are done. And I would like to say here that perhaps it is the success of India's neighborhood first foreign policy in the last 10 years that has drawn a lot of unwanted attention. Let me talk about India and Bangladesh, for example. I think this was perhaps, a copybook example, a successful neighborhood first foreign policy, a successful relationship built between India and Bangladesh for 2 reasons. First, the most important factor that under Sheikh Hasina, she recognized our security considerations. Now, this is where I come again to diplomacy and military interest being 2 sides of the same coin. Before her, I was there as High Commissioner when Khalida Zia was the Prime Minister, and she refused to recognize our security considerations. So whether it was the question of Northeast Indian insurgent groups, giving them support, giving them shelter, giving them training camps, it was very difficult. But once you had 15 years of Sheikh Hasina when she said, your security concerns are mine, I don't want illegal insurgent groups here. For 15 years, there was no war, no illegal insurgent groups in the Northeast, complete peace, complete development. So we saw this, and side by side, Bangladesh got 6.5% annual rate of growth every year because of trade, because of connectivity, because of cooperation, because of their access to the Northeast, and so on. But the moment this I would say this excellent compact combination of diplomacy and security was broken, as happened last year when there was a regime change operation. No students revolt here. It was a clear and simple regime change operation. No spontaneity, no students involved. We've seen how we are going back to what it was when Pakistan was very active in Bangladesh under Khalida Zia. So we see that unless you can build up and sustain your trade and development, your security interests are very seriously affected. And we're seeing this all over South Asia, right from 2022. In 2022, it was Pakistan and Sri Lanka. In 2024, it was Bangladesh. In 2025, it is Nepal. And in each case, it is a very deliberate regime change operation. But we've seen that in some cases, like Sri Lanka, the Gen Z came on the streets, but then went back to constitutionality. They went back to their parliament, they went back to electing a new president, and now they have a new government and doing very well. And we saw yesterday when Prime Minister Harini Anasuya, she's still here, she actually thanked India's neighborhood first foreign policy and says it is a great positive influence in the neighborhood, and she thanked us for all the help that we have given to the Sri Lankan government when they were in their dire economic straits. Similarly, we saw in Nepal that although again so-called spontaneity and Gen Z, but when President Ramchandra Podial and the Chief of Army Staff got together, they put an end to that and saying we're going to take firm action, and it's gone back to having a constitutional election. So I think that these are very, very important aspects of the same side, and the military, the defense forces, and the border guarding forces, and the developmental forces of government have to work as a whole of government. You know, there's been reference to this even earlier, but I think it's very important. And working in silos does not help at all, because at the border, everything comes together. Every aspect of government and trade and defense all come together, and they have to be very carefully in tandem if we are to achieve our objectives and have a well-guarded frontier, but a safe frontier where people will want to cross over in friendship and live with each other in prosperity.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for that opening statement. I want to take that forward with Ambassador Meera Shankar as well. Ambassador Sikri spoke about, I mean, both of you have served in Bangladesh, and looking at the immediate neighborhood, if I were to talk about the extended arc of interest, and the reason why I say that is you look at the situation in Bangladesh, situation in Nepal now, situation in Pakistan, situation in Sri Lanka. Ambassador, how would you define India's extended neighborhood? Should it extend from the Gulf to the Indo-Pacific? What are the strategic priorities within that arc, in your view, ma'am?
I would define India's strategic neighborhood as extending from the Horn of Africa right to the Indo-Pacific. Because whatever happens in these regions directly impacts India. You know, India is Janus-faced. We look westward to the Gulf, and we look eastward to the fast developing economies of East Asia. So we have this dual-faced or dual geographical interest in both these regions. And we have to plan accordingly. Now, our our security policy in the extended neighborhood has to, A, help build a more balanced security environment for India in the face of China's increasing assertiveness and sometimes even aggression, as we have seen on our border. The second would be to look at building India's own defense and technical capabilities, and how we can build partnerships with countries in this region to enhance that. And this would include both imports of defense equipment as well as joint development, joint production, joint research as well. The third would be to ensure India's economic security, and that would mean building resilient supply chains which are not prone to or susceptible to domination or weaponization by any country. And we've seen increasingly that trade and access to limited resources is being used as a leverage or as weaponization in global relations. And this would also include access to resources. So when we look at the extended neighborhood, this would be the objectives of our diplomacy. And finally, it would be also to build connectivity, because, you know, whatever connections we had, because India was the heart of the British Empire, and it had connections running westward to Aden, southward to Colombo, eastward into East Asia. But these connections were severed for political reasons as a result of partition. Now, for India, it's important to rebuild. How do we rebuild these connections? Yes, sea links remain. They were not severed. But land connectivity to East Asia certainly got impacted. Now, you look at what India has been doing in terms of pursuing its policies. There are certain pillars, both bilaterally as well as multilateral groupings, which India has joined to help achieve these objectives. Multilaterally, we joined the Quad and in the Indo-Pacific, and in the West, we joined the I2U2, the India, Israel, US, UAE grouping, which was intended to enhance security and peace in that region. The Quad didn't take on a specific military role because of India's hesitations, since we have China right on our border. But we did get into the area of enhancing maritime security cooperation, particularly sharing of information with regard to domain awareness in the Indo-Pacific. Other than that, there were initiatives on resilient supply chains, access to critical minerals. Australia, for instance, is a key source of critical minerals, but all the processing of those minerals is done in China, which has near dominance in that area. So now one of the agreements that we have signed with Australia is an MOU on critical minerals, and we are looking at joint development of those resources, joint investment, joint sharing of technology. Whether we are able to take it forward will depend on how business gets involved in pursuing these initiatives. Similarly, with regard to building defense capabilities, South Korea is the 10th largest defense exporter in the world. It aims to become the 4th largest by 2027. I'm not sure it will, but it has equipment, it has systems. And with South Korea, L&T has developed the Vajra howitzer, for which an order has been placed also for 100 howitzers by the Indian Army. So that's an example of co-production, joint development. And your challenge is going to be in terms of how we can expand this and raise this to scale. Similarly, with Japan, we have military exercises, training, etc. We signed an MOU on defense cooperation during the Prime Minister's recent visit. And in terms of co-production of defense equipment, they have helped to develop jointly a mast for the Navy. So this helps with regard to stealth and secure communications for the Navy. We are now exploring the possibility of orders and large-scale manufacturing of it for the Indian Navy. With South Korea, we also have an MOU on shipbuilding and are exploring the possibility of joint research or development of diesel-powered submarines, mine-sweeping ships, and so on. So there is a whole range of areas where the technically advanced economies of Japan, South Korea could be very helpful and also enhance India's strategic autonomy, because you're constrained at the moment by having few sources of defense equipment. You have Russia, you have the US, you have Israel, you have France. And Russia has been engaged in the Ukraine war, so supplies are constrained. Israel has been engaged in the Gaza operation, so supplies are constrained. It leaves just France and the US. And you would want to have a larger basket of suppliers, and suppliers who are willing to help you build your capabilities. So recent visits to Australia and Japan, Australia by Rajnath Singh for the defense dialogue at the ministerial level, the first one, and to Japan by the Prime Minister in August, have helped to seal these partnerships and to take them to the next level. In Japan, Japan has committed $67 billion of investment in India over the next decade. That is one major outcome of the visit. It has also signed MOUs on economic security, including working together for ensuring resilient supply chains and access to critical minerals. And the areas identified are semiconductors, pharma, artificial intelligence, and so on. So these are all critical areas. This is how, on the West, Israel is a key defense supplier, particularly for surveillance equipment on the border. And we've used mainly Israeli equipment on our borders. Secondly, we are also working with Israel on drones, unmanned weapon systems, artificial intelligence, and cyber security. In the May 25 cross-border, conflict, we used Israeli drones and missiles. The Barak 8 missile and the Harap kamikaze drone were part of the systems that we had deployed. So this is how you have to look at your security in a much wider arc. The immediate neighborhood is important, but you cannot allow yourself to be hemmed in by the immediate neighborhood and have to break into a much larger arc to be able to even balance the neighborhood and build your own, or achieve your own objectives to enhance your security.
Thank you for that. Very elaborate and well put. I'd like to get a concluding remark from General Shukla there. General Shukla, because you had a very strong view on theaterization. So I wanted to ask you, speaking about the neighborhood, with the neighborhood in mind, if you can summarize for our viewers, because a lot of our generals here today spoke about theaterization, and you had very strong views on that. If you can summarize for us, if we have to become increasingly multi-domain, land, sea, cyber, space, information warfare, part of it, what structural or doctrinal changes, right, must accompany that theaterization in your view to make us future ready?
So, since you say concluding remarks, just let me make two, three quick points. We have to take note of two things. One is, it seems to me that, the arc of geopolitics is tending towards hard power and national security like never before. If that is a fact, then we need to do far more. You see, the conversations we heard since this morning was, "Bhai, pehle se to hum achhe hain." Of course. But are you better than China? China is not tucked away in Latin America. Aapke bagal mein. So the point is, even the most diligent bureaucrats and military officers will say, "Bhai, humne file move kar di." Arey bhai, you have to win the strategic military competition with China. In that sense, let us ask honestly, is the lag growing or is it reducing? It is better to be honest before the event than blame game after the event. So if you look at these two to three things, we have to really step up our game and shed shibboleths of the past. As Ambassador Sikri said, just collapse the silos. India में इतना talent है कि अगर आपने ये silos खत्म कर दिए, private sector, government, startups, all that, we will be on talent pathways. We will do a great deal. So just let me give you, one example of shibboleths of the past. When the second attack took place on the Afghan embassy, I was in the MO Directorate, where Rajiv Ghai is here now, and I was sent by General Bikram to Kabul. So the chief of the Afghan army, I don't recall his name, but he was a Sanders trained guy. मैं उसको बोलने लगा वहाँ सर non-lethal aid, because वो हमारी conversation थी. He said, "Yaar, I'm a military man. If you come to lecture me on non-lethal aid, let's close this conversation, have whiskey with me and go back." And then you know what he told me? He said, "We are a very proud military, Afghan military. We have tanks, we have artillery. हमसे आपसे कुछ spares मांग रहे हैं." मैं यहाँ वापस आया, लंबा चौड़ा presentation हुआ, and it was concluded in one thing: no, we don't give non-lethal aid. The militaries ask for lethal aid, they won't ask. It is these shibboleths must be shared. On this metaphor of non-lethal aid, we have lost at one time, we may have recovered, the Sri Lankans, the Nepalese, and Afghanistan. हमने वही कहानी नेपाल को बताया नेक्सल के बाद. We have to revisit these things, and especially in Sindoor, because Sindoor should be a warning to us that India's rise will be undermined by friends, neighbors, partners, adversaries, competitors alike. So we have to step up our game. ये कहना कि भाई हम पहले से अच्छे हैं. Now the concluding remarks. So where are we honestly and where we need to go? In my view, and this is a very informed audience, we can have a question-answer session. We are where the Americans were in 1949 when they set up a permanent chairman joint chiefs. That is what we have, CDS. उसके बाद देखो Americans को क्या हुआ. They suffered the ignominy of Iran. They were just like us. They said coordinated jointness. 6 महीने rehearsal किया. It led to that fiasco of that Iran. General Dushant is here. He heralded he led a great study on jointmanship and theaterization. Anyway, so the point is, Iran, it was a fiasco in this coordinated jointness. Then they got to Barry Goldwater Nichols. They did Gulf War I, Gulf War II, integration. Now the talk is of cross-pollination, fusion. Is our needle going to be stuck in 1949 and we keep saying, nahi, hum pehle se achhe hain? No. Akash Tir, we got by this time. Is it any match to the Golden Dome which the Americans are speaking of? So, hame karna kya hai? In that sense, we have to go a long way. Let me take 2 things which were discussed in the morning. Space. So, General Bhatt made this argument of persistent surveillance. Sorry, it's not good enough. You need offensive ISR. What happened in Midnight Hammer? The first command which got into the act was Space Command. It repositioned the satellites. That is why it is a combatant command. Cyber is a combatant command. See, cyber is not merely about hitting websites. It is about cyber exploits. The Chinese have exploits which will paralyze Delhi and Bombay for days together. Why have they not done it? They don't need to do it. All these attacks that you see are reconnaissance attacks. Yeah. I'm saying across domains, the challenges are far greater. India is a great country. We have done well in Sindoor. But we must transform, we must disrupt. And all these, things can happen. So my argument is this: don't be satisfied with tinkering. Disruption has a rationale of its own. Shed the shibboleths of the past, and you have great talent in India. If we just, change our way of thinking, we can actually become this Sudrir Surakshit Bharat. If we don't, our rise may not be guaranteed. You must read The Guilty Men of 1962. All that was supposed to be done and that was not to be done. So that's a warning I would like to sound, because our challenges do seem to be grave.
Thank you, General Shukla, Ambassador Veena Sikri and Ambassador Meera Shankar, for being with us today and for your views on this very important subject, Neighborhood Watch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, speakers and participants, for this engaging and enriching discussion. I would like to request Niranjan Narayanaswamy, Executive Editor, Republic Media Network, to felicitate the guests.